What's up? We're back. It's a new episode, and this time we're reviewing Cherry. This is going to be a spoiler review, so if you haven't seen the film, go check it out, then come back to see our review. Now, getting into it, this film's directed by the Russo brothers. It's starring Ciara Bravo and Tom Holland. Tom Holland playing the role of the protagonist in this film. This is based on a true story, which I think makes knowing that makes everything a little bit more crazy. But Nick, let's get your general thoughts on the film as far as what you thought.
This was a really weird experience, I think, for me, because there was like it operated in extremes, and I was like, there's some like pretty interesting stuff happening, some very good performances, but there's also stuff happening on the other end. I was just like, this is ridiculous. In particular for me, I think sometimes the writing got like insane and like insanely over the top, and but like there was always just some like Tom Holland's performance, Sarah Bravo's performance, for instance, like kind-ish balanced it out, or at least they really tried to. And it was just a film of like really large extremes on both ends that I felt I was like constantly getting like whiplash in a way, because I was just like, oh, that was cool, and I was like, oh, that was stupid, and it was just like back and forth. This film also felt like 5 hours long. There was like so much stuff just happened in this movie, and yeah, it just felt really long too. I'll cut it off there and I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, I think Tom Holland was, for me, he was amazing. Um, I thought he really showed how good of an actor he was in this role. And it's one thing to be a great actor in a good movie. It's another thing to be a great actor in a movie that's so-so. Um, and he does that because this film doesn't give him any help, to be honest. The pacing is really, really bad. It's inconsistent. Um, the writing, the narration isn't quite there, and it feels like they try and sit with the characters too long. There's a lot of slow motion, which plays out weirdly. I will give props to the cinematography because I thought the cinematography was really great. I think from a lighting perspective, it was beautifully shot. Uh, I thought the when he went to war, I think that was shot very well. I thought that was probably the sequence I found most interesting and most touching. That was my favorite chapter. I think it's chapter 3. Um, that one, I think, that's the part of the film I'm like, wow, this is really what like touches me. And there are other parts of the film that just don't quite hit. I will say there is one line from the Tom Holland and Ciara that I really loved, where he's like, "I think I love you," and then she pauses for 20 seconds, and then is like, "Thank you," and then just walks away. I was laughing so hard at that. Um, but let's get into some more specifics, Nick. Whether you want to go chapter by chapter, or just like what you like found problems with and what you really liked. Let's break it down.
Let's let's I don't know, how do you want to do this compliment sandwich of like good, bad, and good? Get the bad out of the way, because like a part of me doesn't want to go chronological, because honestly at a certain point I was like, I have no idea where this story's like going. I guess that could bring us to the writing. I think for me the writing was just the biggest sticking point. I just like it just felt like characters are getting ping ponged back and forth between circumstances um like the first chapter. I was still trying to figure out who Tom Holland's character was as a character, and then she breaks up with him and he makes the decision to join the military, and I was like, that's a really, I've seen some extreme reactions from breakups, but I'm like, that's like really out there. And um then like when she decides to join him in doing drugs, I was like, I feel like there's a whole lot more of context that could have been given to that particular decision. It just felt like, for me, the writing, I was just like constantly like going in and out and didn't really know like, if this wasn't based on a true story, I would have generally been like, why did they plot out any of this in the way that it was? Because none of it felt like it made sense. But it happened to a real person, so I guess, crazy life. So Yeah, I don't know. It just like just character decisions for me just felt like really out there. Tom Holland and Ciara Bravo like gave it their all, which again, like I said in the beginning, like helped balance it out a little. I just feel like I don't know. It just felt like just constant, just like I didn't know like what the point of it all was. Like the film ends and they're back together, and I was just like, and what? I don't know. It's just like I just didn't know like what was like like was it supposed to be a love story? Was that it? The Russo brothers have said in interviews it's about the opioid. I'm not pronouncing that right, like the drug epidemic, but that has only concerns like the last two parts of the film, and there's like a whole section that's a knock on Full Metal Jacket. So I don't know. I just constantly felt like I didn't. I was like trying to understand like what the film was about, and the writing was just always like changing focus. Yeah.
Right.
If you want to start with yeah, that's opening thoughts of
Yeah,
that.
I really took the meaning of a film in a different way than I think they did.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't think of it as much as a film about opioids as more of a film about how someone who is, brought into the military, basically, Tom Holland, the way he describes it in that monologue in that moment is like he had me, right? Like it
Yeah.
was a game, like they were predators preying on these, people who had nothing else going on in their life. In this idea of structure.
Right.
Uh, and I think it was a comment at the time, in that period of time where they were recruiting people to go in the military, to go to Iraq and
Yeah.
Afghanistan, um, and how they were taking advantage of these kids essentially and just
Yeah.
like manipulating them. And then how when these kids come out, suffering from PTSD, they just throw medication at them. They don't treat the veterans right. The government doesn't, and then society doesn't, and then it's
Yeah.
like what happens. And that is a really interesting thing to me. Like
Yeah.
that is a really beautiful thing if done correctly. And I think they put the care and effort into trying to do it the right way. I don't think it comes across necessarily the wrong way, but I think the execution just could have been a lot better.
I think you interpreted this film better than they did, which is like I don't know, concerning from I guess from because like they wanted to say one thing, but we took it another way, which I guess is art in its essence. But I'm just like, so what was your focus then? Because I do buy the your interpretation of the military standpoint, and in some ways that would have been a better like thematic backbone. But often like it was just like, oh, we're like now we're like have to rob banks for like this. And he does say Tom Holland does say something at one point that I like when he was like, I don't think anyone who's ever robbed a bank hasn't done it out of desperation, which I thought that line was kind of summed up that second half really well. Just I don't know. I just think it's weird that they were like, no, it's about drugs, but drugs are like the second, third priority in this entire film. So I don't know what they were looking at when they got this story.
Yeah, it seems unfocused, I
Mhm.
think would be the right way to put it. And it seemed like they tried to fit it into chapters. But
Mhm.
if you're going to go that way, make a mini series out of it,
That's what I
frankly.
was thinking too. Yeah.
Frankly, if that's the way you think, if you think it's most digestible as separate chapters, then it's separate episodes. And you have 6 separate episodes addressing the 6 different parts of this guy's life, right?
Yeah. I was watching and I was like, this is
I
what Queen's Gambit would have been if it was a movie, just all of it like
mhm.
brought
Right,
together.
right. And I understand they're trying to juggle with a lot, but the first chapter, I really buy Sierra Bravo and Tom Holland's relationship because they
Yeah.
have great chemistry.
Yes, they do.
But what I don't buy is just the backstory of Tom Holland's character.
What was
I
his
don't, I don't, I'm not invested in him. What was he like as a kid? What
Yeah,
was, why did he have nothing going for him in
yeah.
his life? We
That's
see
that
that, the satire, there's a lot of satirical moments, like the pizza,
Mhm.
tosses up the pizza and then is like, oh, you're fired essentially, you're terrible at your job. Like we don't get to see him really
Right.
struggling with his life in the first act that gives us the idea of like, all right, this is why he would go to the military because there's no other way out. And then boom, the military is like, this is our chance.
Yeah, it's just like I I know the book is written by a guy named Nico Walker, but they never say that name. I don't think do they say his Tom Holland's character's name at all in this film? I'm trying to like the
That's
synopsis
a great
called
question.
a synopsis calls him something. I think they just straight up call him Cherry, but I don't even think they. That's like a throwaway military nickname for him at like one scene of the film. So like, and I feel like that's really representative of what you're saying. Like, we don't know who this guy is. He kind of just shows up, does a bunch of decisions without any real context. Again, doing that, like joining the military as a response to a college relationship breakup, and then just goes from there. I was like, the only context we get was when he was like, I take Xanax for my anxiety. But I was like, there's a whole origin episode around that alone, I feel. And I just wish they explored that.
Right. I mean, that would have been a fascinating way. Like, he has anxiety and it makes it really hard for him to do a lot of stuff, right? It
Yeah,
makes it really hard to keep a job. It makes it really hard for him to do this, that, and the other. And so he takes Xanax to do it. And that's a drug that plays in later on into the script, right?
right.
Um, like there are other ways I feel like they could have approached the first chapter that would have really helped push the narrative along
Yeah,
in a more grabbing way.
yeah. Like,
This
oh, you go, sorry.
No. Let's finish up on this point, and
I
then
was
I'll
just
move
gonna
on.
say,
So go
like,
ahead.
yeah, like I know, like a lot of people's least favorite episode of Queen's Gambit is the first episode because it's like relatively slow and it doesn't even feature Anya Taylor Joy much at all, really. But it's like it's so important just for setting like character context, and I feel like here they skipped to where Queen's Gambit was in the second episode, but and there's like missing context of like who this I guess unnamed person is since we both aren't sure of his name. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like that like starting point is where they already kind of like lost some of the edge of the story.
Yeah, basic training. I think that's the second chapter. Is too long, I believe.
Okay.
Um, and like there are things like the robot. Like, why is he doing the robot, right? And they I feel like they overdo sometimes the ridiculousness of the military. Um, but what were some of the problems you may have had with the second section?
The second chapter, I actually didn't have. I actually thought the whole like robot thing was kind of like funny and like because like by that point I was trying to like okay so this film is kind of going for a little surreal like over the top vibe so I was like all right I sure I guess it feels a little weird but okay. I just think as a fan of Full Metal Jacket, I was kind of like, they're definitely just riffing on every single aspect and the way it's shot, and the way, like, even like when they condense the aspect ratio, I was like, that's literally, for me at least, I was like, the only reason this had to have been done was to riff on Stanley Kubrick. But beyond that, I was just like, all right, I guess it wasn't. It was the chapter I probably was like the least invested in, just because like again, I felt it was like a riff on a much better movie. Um, I don't know. There were like whenever the like he was explaining the nicknames they had for them and they like flash across the screen. What were your thoughts on that? Because there I was like, I guess sure you didn't have to do that. It
Yeah,
was a bit over stylized or whatnot.
yeah. I think a lot of times in this film it is over stylized.
Hmm.
Um, and rather than being interesting, it's distracting.
Hmm.
What I think this chapter could have really used is building up the relationship between um, Nico Walker and Jimenez. Because while I think that payoff in chapter three is pretty solid still because of the
Yeah,
performance Tom Holland has,
for sure.
I think it could have been more solid from a story perspective if that had been the core of this chapter. If they had focused in on those two going through basic training.
Hmm.
And it's just I think it's the satirical aspects of this film. Sometimes they just don't hit for me.
Yeah,
The ridiculousness of the military. Like I think you can make the military ridiculous without making it over the top and ridiculous.
yeah.
To the point where it's like, all right, they're trying to make a point. Just like
Yeah, like if you want
we should
something
feel it, not notice it.
right, like I feel like the best types of like satire, even like when you're trying to like depict something as it is, you just have to depict it as it is and not like in heighten it by any sense, because then you run the risk of it being like unrealistic, which I feel they kind of got here with the training and all that. I don't know. I agree with all your thoughts. It's just like a like even that sequence where they're like going down the stairs and they have like the shooting targets come up. I was just like, all right, I guess. I'm not sure why this one's
Mhm.
particularly here, but all right.
And I would have liked it if they had just stayed with that regular aspect ratio. It didn't really do anything for the story
Yeah,
except to make it smaller on my TV screen.
yeah.
I
They
guess part of it, they didn't plan on it being seen on a TV screen, to be fair.
uh, they did that a few more times though, and I was like,
Yeah,
I if you want, like when Spike Lee did it in Five Bloods, I feel like there was like some sort of intention because he was like playing with time periods. Here it felt just
right, right.
like, what can we do to make this look cool or whatnot?
Yeah, yeah. In Five Bloods, the purpose of it is one to give it back to a aspect ratio of the time,
Mhm,
and it's two to help distinguish between the past and modern day because the way they did makeup, it's the same actors
mhm,
and they look about the same age. So it's really just that's the way that you distinguish between past and present. So
right.
like their narrative purpose here, I'm not quite sure what the narrative purpose was, to be honest.
Yeah.
Let's move on to chapter 3 though. I love this chapter. I
Yes.
will I will stick up for this chapter all day. From that amazing drone shot they have, if you've seen it on you haven't seen it on YouTube, go check it out. The Russo brothers. I think Joe Russo breaks it down of how they had this drone. It's the one shot that
Yeah.
starts when Tom Holland's medic for the first time in the field, and it
I
goes
know
all the
exactly.
way. Yeah, I was just wowed by the way the Russo brothers shot that. They're obviously pretty great at shooting action,
Mhm,
um, and God, that phone call. I saw it in part of the trailer, but the way it
mhm.
plays out in the movie is so heartbreaking, man. That
Yeah.
phone call. He's just by himself. He's just sitting there, and in that moment, I felt for Nico so much, and the way they build it up to that moment with Jimenez, and you see him sprinting towards it, them right after the IED go. I think it was IED that went off. Um, it's just like it's so heartbreaking. It gives you such a picture of what happens to people like this, and a guy like Nico who didn't really have a lot of people to latch on to, didn't have a lot of friends, and his friends were in that truck. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it hit me of like that feeling of what going to war is like, and that's where I think in this and how people struggle with it, and that's what I was really like, this is the core of this chapter. This is what makes this chapter great.
Yeah, no, I'll stand there with you alongside this particular chapter because I feel like that's where like I guess the film became the most focused. I feel like this is also the one where the Russo brothers and the writing kind of like fully like we're on the same page and it's just like I don't know, it just felt like the most focused and was also I think the most well shot of the film. I think yeah, that drone shot was great. It reminded me a lot of like the Hawkeye fight from Endgame, like smaller scale, but like I don't know, just similar just way of how they did it. Um, I don't know. That one was really cool. Like I remember going off of chapter two. I was like, let me guess, this is gonna be their like Hurt Locker riff off now. But it was like no, they actually succeed. Like it was like a very different like part and it just felt very I don't know different and unique and yeah that's the chapter for me that I was like really like okay this is where everything's like coming together so far. The phone call scene, yes, that was really great and yeah I agree with everything you said. This was my favorite chapter for sure.
Yeah, by far. Like if this chapter was what the whole film was like quality wise, we would be talking about this as like a best picture contender. I really think so. I think this chapter,
That's
the
fair.
third chapter, was that good.
Mhm.
Um, and then there are the 4 through 6, which I don't know. You may not agree with this, but I think they all blend together. I think they're really one chapter, to be honest.
No, yeah, no, I buy that.
Um,
I buy that.
And I think the fourth part of this is the one that really hits hard. You see how he struggles with everything. You see how his friend coming back from war struggles and how they just can't deal with this addiction. And the performance is so great.
Yeah,
And for about 10 to 15 minutes, you're like, oh my God, this is awful. And I understand why they are becoming addicts, why they're constantly on drugs, all of it.
yeah,
Um, And at some point, it loses pacing and it loses interest. It becomes almost like a montage of them doing drugs, robbing a bank, doing drugs, robbing a bank.
It goes on too long, which like you could art we've already said that about like chapter two, and arguably some elements from chapter one, chapter three could be trimmed, but like I think in particular in the second half, like that's a whole movie. I feel like that was the if they were so committed to making a drug epidemic movie, that's what they wanted, but they needed backstory, so they had to shoot the first three chapters. It just I don't know, there's just a lot they crammed in there, and just a lot like we're just yeah, it got like repetitive, and I was just like, oh okay, he's robbing the bank. Now he's like, you know, now he has to like now there's this dude named Black Mask like in play. There's this other drug dealer with his sister. I was just like, there's so much going on right now.
Yeah, I think we're going to cover this more vaguely and generally just because of time constraints, but
Mhm.
I think there there are redeeming factors. I really love the ending.
Fair,
Um,
yeah, fair
where he's
arc.
just like, I'm done. You
Mhm.
know, he's he's in the bank, he takes off his mask and he says, ring the alarm. He's like, I can't do this any longer.
Yeah,
Um, like that is a beautiful moment in the story. And when he's in the street and he's shooting the gun off in the street, like that plays so well because it's a guy who's been screaming for help, right? He's shooting in the street and people are running away, right?
yeah,
Which they should, obviously. But there are no cops for a while. They're not nearby. There's no one coming to the rescue. He's just all alone shooting his gun, trying to be noticed. And I felt like that was so emblematic of what I thought the film was
mhm,
about people these veterans coming back from war and no one giving them the care that they need. No one is there to make sure they're okay, like to really be there for them, even though they are the ones out at war serving, protecting all of us. I thought
right.
that was a beautiful moment that was frustratingly kind of let down by the slow and inconsistent build up to it.
Yeah, I just felt like there's I think I don't know, I feel like yeah, just the focus was just like all over, and like when they did hit something, they really hit it. But then like there's still so many other moments where they didn't, that it just felt like like a constant like up and down, like the graphs when the earthquake hits, like just like all across the page. So just the moments where it hits, like chapter three, like that ending you're speaking of, like that works. But then just like I don't know, it's just really like inconsistent. That like just makes it so uneven. Tom Holland's the most consistent thing though, for sure. NCR Bravo.
I would I have a tough time nominating people who I don't think are in great movies because normally I like to reward the film being as good, but I would consider nominating him despite I have some major problems with this film, to be honest. I think that's the best way of putting it. I don't think it's a bad film. If you were asking me to rate this as like a rotten or fresh film on Rotten Tomatoes, it's fresh, but it's not fresh by a lot. Um,
Yeah.
Nick, is there anything you want to cover about the final three chapters, or do you want to go into like overall
Nah,
scores?
we can wrap it up here. It's just moments of like I see what you're doing there, and I like it, and just drowned out amidst moments where I wasn't sure what was happening. Um I mean Tom Holland, no one needed to say this, right? Because we everyone knew it, but his career, like, just a great another notch there. So it's gonna be great to see where he goes from here, and it's nice that he's like, especially in this early part of his career, he's really trying to like break any Spider-Man mold that has is attached to him. And for the Russo brothers, I mean, there's always the gray man, I guess coming out. I think coming out next year. We'll see. We'll see. With that film, I think I'll just have a better idea like how these guys are, because I think this one was just without like I don't know Disney support or not support, just like that playing in that area. I feel like they kind of floundered a bit, but that's what the gray man's for.
Right. Yeah. And they didn't do, I know they didn't direct, but they wrote 21 Bridges, which I know also was very great or good, to be honest, from what I've heard. Um, the last thing before we get into where it ranks on our like Oscars for 2020 films,
Yeah.
um, the score, the operatic score bothered me so much. The score is like wrong in so many different places. I'm listening, I'm like, why am I listening to an opera here? And then like a real like piano score in other places, like this satirical aspect that's played through the
Yeah.
score. It feels
Yeah.
like they
I
were trying to find emotion through the score and just couldn't get it because they knew they didn't have it in certain parts of the film.
yeah. Yeah. Again, it was a lot of just overcompensating for the fact that they didn't have much there. If I watch that ending scene again, the one you're talking about, like that where he gives himself up to the police, if I turned the sound off, I would have been a much happier person. But like the music cutting, I was just like, all right, this is like there could have been there's like a few other music choices that would have functioned better, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, yeah, it does raise questions to me about the Russo brothers outside of Marvel because I think they're great directors, and the directing of this is. I think the directing of this is solid. There's some problems with it, but there are no like major flaws. They're clearly very good directors, but I
Yeah,
think they almost need like that producer or studio head that's going to give them more notes. It's going to be like,
yeah,
this doesn't quite work. You need to fix this, right? Feige
mhm,
is notoriously great at doing that. That's what part of what makes the MCU great, and they make great films in the MCU, the Russo brothers. So I'll be curious going into their Netflix film, The Gray Man, how it goes. But let's talk about 2020. I do this as like my 2020-21 list
yeah,
because of COVID. This would normally be a 2020 movie.
mhm,
Um, for the Oscar season, it is. I know for me, like ranking it, it's about, gosh, it's about 18 to 22. That's
okay.
where I'd probably say.
Comparing it to my 22 movies, because I personally am just counting as a 21, 2021. 2020 list will probably be low. Just I haven't ranked it there, but that's where it'd be for right now. For 21, similarly, I think just by the skin of its teeth due to like chapter 3 and Tom Holland, it gets above Tom and Jerry, which I have at the bottom right now, ish.
Mhm.
It's around like there in the little things. Um, I don't think this will get any Oscar noms. I think the season's in more ways than one is like set already. There's like
Yeah,
it would be a real surprise if anything from like this film or even any films. I mean, the Oscar predictions are tomorrow from when we're filming this, so
right.
Oscar nominations. Excuse me. So like it's too late.
I'd say its only chance is best cinematography.
Arguably, yeah.
I think
But
there could get a nomination, but otherwise,
but then they'll
I
have to
don't
go
see
up
Holland
against
getting nominated.
they'll have to go up against Nomadland.
Oh yeah, it has no chance against Nomadland or Mank or any of those films.
Yeah.
Um, but with that, that wraps up this review of Cherry. Let us know what you thought of the film, the performances, the directing, all that sort of stuff. What was your favorite chapter? What was your least favorite chapter? Let us know down in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video, and we'll see you next time.
Peace out.